So, therefore, I took the next topic with me, and that's readiness for change. Could I just ask you to have a 2-minute talk around each table? Just talk about what does it take to be ready for change? It's a big question, but try to just have a small talk around each table about what does it take to be ready for change. I'm going to show you now. We asked ourselves this question some years ago, and we did a global research project about readiness for change, and also how serious play could influence readiness for change. This is what we found. So I'm going to give you a theoretical model for what areas to assess and also work with if you're looking to do change in your organization. Then I'm going to show you one of the many exercises we did around change to sort of provoke you a bit in relation to change. Well, I had to throw in this cartoon. It's from J.P. Cotter, that organizational change is easier said than done. A lot of people want change, they don't want to change, and they definitely don't want to lead change. Why is that we're struggling not only in your organization, but all around the world with change? Well, because we underestimate change. And organizational change needs a lot of work and a lot of focus to do so. And often we're not really ready to do the change. If you dwell a bit more about organizational readiness for change, it's really about, are we ready? Am I ready? A lot of organizations I meet and work with, it works this way. The CEO pulls out a card box, stands on that, talks about a change, and then yells out to everybody, "Are you ready?" And they all know how to do it. Yay! And then they walk off to the coffee machine and say, "Oh, crap. How are we going to do this? I mean, we haven't got enough working hours. We haven't got any resources, blah, 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 blah." But we all learn to say in modern organizations, "Yay, I'm ready." No, I'm not. So, I need to be ready and we need to be ready for change. If you look into the components of readiness for change, it's all about the commitment, saying we are committed to making this change. But I also need to be committed. So a lot of organizations, we forget all about the we. We just look at all the people. Are they committed? Yeah, we think they're committed. Okay, let's roll. But there's one component 98% of all organizations around the world forget about when they do change. They only focus on the commitment part and forget all about change efficacy, which is the quotient of commitment. That's actually that we think we can pull it off. We've got the resources, we've got the brains, we've got the capabilities to do it. We forget all about that, and we just try to push it through with the same resources. If you look at the theoretical validated model here, what we found was that there's a really fundamental thing that needs to be present if you want to do change. That's psychological safety. No psychological safety, forget all about change, forget all about even incremental development. That all the research points towards psychological safety is paramount. Then two other indirect factors that influence your readiness for change, that is cohesion within your organization. How well does it stick together, your organization? I'll elaborate a bit more. Then, of course, general motivation, but also motivation to the particular change you're embarking on. Then there are two direct factors that influence the engagements towards the particular change, and then also your knowledge creation, finding out new solutions, new knowledge about how to deal with the change, sharing it with everybody, and making sure that we can all pull in the same direction, etc. All of that leads towards change commitment and change efficacy. If we look at it, psychological safety is all about a secure environment where I feel I can speak my mind and I can take risks. I cannot try out new solutions, do stuff, if I don't feel secure. Another thing, an attribute of psychological safety is that if you ask your organization, It's also whether they feel that their particular skills and knowledge is harnessed when you are in change. That they've got an environment where they can feed in and they're acknowledged for their contributions. This is a leadership responsibility, I'm sorry to say, to create this environment. Then motivation, no change without motivation. You need an overall motivation to be part of what's going on at work, but also the particular change. You also need to feel that it's worth doing. So you need to explain leadership-wise why we're doing it, where we're heading, etc., so that people can connect with it motivation-wise. Furthermore, back in the day when I started doing strategy, we worked with something called burning platforms. Everybody thought, okay, you just need to create enough heat on the organization, then everybody will be motivated to do something. But it doesn't point that way necessarily in our society right now, not with also young people, etc. So they need to come by themselves or join in freely. Cohesion is really a construct which is really about how well does your organization stick together. If the cohesion is low, you're never going to pull it up because you'll break up, people will leave, and then new people come in, and you'll never get anywhere. So you need a certain level of cohesion within your organization, how well they stick together, because cohesive organizations tend to perform much better in change. They are also much more resilient towards change and also follow through in a different way. And furthermore, part of big cohesion is for people to be united, especially towards shared goals, long-term goals like I was mentioned down here. Engagement, it's not done with all the rest. Once you're launched a change, you need to make sure frequently that people see where we're heading and also feel that they can contribute and they get excited about contributing towards your change. So, engagement is all around also seeing how I can contribute with my skills, etc., is also paramount. Last but not least, and this is one of the weakest points I see in a lot of organizations around, is knowledge creation. They've got all the rest right, and then it collapses in the middle of the change. Why? Because they haven't got a structure to sort of build up knowledge, say, okay, what did you learn? What solutions did you find? Sort of creating the accumulative, collective knowledge around the change, how we're progressing, how we're doing, what worked, what didn't work, etc. So there's no structures for feeding in knowledge, learning from each other during the change. Then change commitment is really about that we are all committed to this change. We are all willing to follow through on the change, both on a personal and on an individual level. We are also willing to go try out different things to implement the change. However, it's not done by that because we also need the efficacy. We need to have a gut feeling, like intuition, that we can pull through. We've got the resources, we've got the things to navigate politics, we've got the skills to measure progress, how we're doing, coordinate tasks, all the structures that we need. We might not need them all from the start, but we need to pay attention to building up efficacy all the way through this change. So this was just a different angle to some of the other elements you heard this morning to change. And if anybody wants it, there's a big white paper on this global research that I'll send to the people in charge here, and then if any of you want it, then you can get it. Also with the more technical sides to this study. Then the next step in our global research was that we got a validated model around readiness for change. Then we asked ourselves, could serious play help with building up readiness for change in organizations? And we started researching that, and it was a definite answer, yes, to that question. So we did a whole sequence of different exercises to target the different things we found in the research. What it showed from the research was that we actually use or need play to navigate change, because change is all about seeing a new perspective. Change is, if you boil down change, it's really your ability to change your perspective really fast, set your eyes on a new perspective and start working towards it. It could also be a more smaller change where you have to come up with new solutions to something already existing, but it's all about your ability to change perspectives like we just did here. That can be really hard if you haven't got any sort of things that can help you in the change of perspective, especially as a leader. Because you'll be faced with things like, we don't want to change. We don't want you leading this change. We just want to stay as it is right now. And then you're there. So you need to find ways of helping people change their perspective and gradually start working towards the new perspective. This is the small exercise to just trigger the participants' minds that you can change perspective, especially if you are more liberated in your brain, hence using play to break out of normal think patterns, normal roles, etc. The last bit I just want to show to you, I know some of you have to leave or it's getting late, you've been listening along, so I've just got one more exercise and a bit of the newest research we've done using Lego Serious Play. One of the new kids on the block in organizational development, business development, is reframing. Everybody talks about reframing, the ability to reframe and see things in a different way than you normally do. We've been doing it for a long time, but the emphasis on being able to reframe your business has become bigger, because otherwise they might choose somebody else. So you need to be constantly aware about what's going on, what mistakes are we making, not seeing mistakes as something awful, but as a learning point to improve, to innovate. There's a lot of different theories around reframing. How do you reframe challenges, problems, so they become productive, learning points, etc. I'm just going to take you through a couple of them just to inspire you that these could also be practices you go home and try next time you face a challenge in your business or you're struggling with something. If we look at systems thinking, sometimes you can solve your problems better by looking more holistically on your problems, seeing what part of system are they part of. Often problems are not standing by themselves. They're often related to other problems or other challenges. So the system thinking is about seeing problems as part of a bigger system. It's also about looking at feedback loops, intersections, how they link interdependencies, and look at it from a more systemic point of view. What do I mean with that? By seeing what surrounds your problem, you might find solutions you didn't think of when you just isolated looked at the problem. In terms of reframing, I've got an example here from my neck of the woods that a company struggling with producing things at the right time, they look at it just not as a production problem, but more like a supply chain, looking at the entire supply chain to find solutions instead of just feeding into the actual problem. Cognitive bias theory, which is really about how we frame a problem, really leads to a set of already given solutions. So it might be that you always say, okay, when I encounter this type of problem, then it's always something to do with lack of money or blah, blah, blah. So you've already set your eyes on what's the problem and how it needs to be solved. That's not necessarily so, because we need to explore our biases in order to find the right solutions. If you keep repeating the same mistakes, it might be that you actually bias towards the certain problem in your business. And it's really about coming across these problems. I've got an example here from a case I worked on where I worked with a company. They were very hesitant to making what I would say needed investments into their business because they considered the cost too high. Then we looked more at, okay, what's the long-term perspective in your investments? Are they going to give a long-term return on investment? And there they found that actually, yes, they were. And it was a no-brainer when they saw the long-term perspective in it. Had we not challenged that, they would have said no to this investment and they might not have been here today, this company. But by making the more long-term risk-taking, they were actually there and still going strong. Another one is double-loop learning theory. A lot of times we do single-loop solutions in our organizations. What do I mean with that? We see a problem, we fix it. We don't look behind the problem and say, what is really the root cause of this problem? What assumptions have we made about the problem? We only just fix it, let's do it, and then it might be it reoccurs again and again and again and again, and you can't understand, I fixed it. Why is it there? That's because we have to challenge some of the assumptions and deeper reflections about why do we do things this way. Double loop learning theory, if you take an example, this is also from a company I work with. They were having problem with employee satisfaction. Their normal solution to this was to give them a raise in salary. And they keep repeating themselves, yeah, we raised over 20% the last 5 years and they're still dissatisfied. And then we sort of looked at the assumptions saying, perhaps it doesn't matter with salary. Might be a hygienic factor, and look more towards leadership and communication in our process here. So that's another way of looking at changing your business. Then framing theory is really about how we use language and metaphors to frame things, and then we get a certain assumption or bias that leads us towards a certain solution. Any sector, like dentists, like doctors, like business people like me, we've got a certain lingo, a certain language, a certain way of expressing things, and that actually keeps us biased in our framing of our problems. What do I mean with that? Is that sometimes we actually limit ourselves by our framing of the challenges and problems in our organizations. What I've tried to do with Lego Serious Play is actually giving you a different language, a different way of framing things, because we are doing it very differently with a different state of mind, using a different way of expressing ourselves. So Lego Serious Play is a known tool for actually dealing with framing of things, as an example here. Another example here from a case I know was that a government reframes environmental regulations as protection for future generations, shifting the whole framing from a problem or a restriction to a responsibility. You can also do that as leaders. Try to think about if you reframed a challenge in your business to something else, your employees might respond differently. So, do any of you ever reframe your business? Sit down and say, okay, the problems I've got, should we keep on solving them in the same way? You'd really challenge yourself in your business saying, perhaps it's not our capabilities, but perhaps we're dealing with the wrong problem. Question mark. One of the newest theories on this field, I've been fortunate enough to work with this lady. It's a lady called Amy Edmonton out of Harvard University. She published some research and a book a couple of years ago. It was called The Right Kind of Wrong. And Amy's point of view is that failure is not a simple opposition to success. It is actually a multifaceted concept you can learn from. And actually, mistakes sometimes actually packs more potential than success. If you're truly receptive to what's going on, you are also very conscientious in your business about what are productive and non-productive mistakes, and you're looking for the right points. Some of the most successful organizations I've seen around are the ones who deliberately take risk and experiment in a controlled environment, trying to find new solutions. And I know perhaps it's a bit mind-boggling in a business where you just need to get it right. You can't put like one tooth from the back in the front, but there might be a lot of other things you can do to actually learn from mistakes. And it's actually really about creating a culture with a high level of psychological safety where it's all right to talk about mistakes and actually dwell at them, analyze the mistakes to see what learning potential they've got. Often when I've been a leader myself, often we're so stressed out, we just get so tired and drained by mistakes. You just think, why something I'm not allowed to say? Can't you just get it right? Just do what I tell you to do, nothing else, just do it. So, Amy points towards that there are 3 types of failure. There are the basic ones which you should try to annihilate, preventable mistakes or errors. Then there's more complex errors like that arises from the system, complexity or uncertainty you're part of in your sector. You can't always do so much with them. You can try to roll with them and find out as you go some mitigation strategies for them. But what you're looking for is intelligent failures where you actually deliberately try to experiment with something knowing you might not get it right from the start. They actually pack some of the biggest innovation and learning points. They might actually make you billionaires if you get it really right. There are a lot of examples of that around. The biggest example is Post-its. You never heard the story about Post-its? Somebody, he wanted to highlight certain parts in his Bible, and he actually thought that these pieces of paper he put into the Bible was a bit sort of irritated. They fell out all the time. So he experimented with some glue on them, and then bingo, there's your Post-it. Okay, I've got one final exercise. I hope you're going to, it's going to be, the feedback on this exercise is a relatively new one, has been quite good. So it's the last build of today, and then we're going to round off. I hope you are willing to go on a journey, and you're willing to push yourself in your brain a bit on this one, and then see what comes out of it. I hope that this last small exercise have triggered yourself into, as a leader, as a business owner, to look at reframing things, because we're often victims of our bias and assumptions. Sometimes it's just small incremental things, if you are receptive to it and learning from it, that can actually make a huge difference in your business. I know that we've gone through things here in a fast manner because I wanted to show you a bit about what play can do, but also link it with a bit of research and a bit of theory. So I hope that's been all right. So you don't only leave with some Lego exercise, but also a bit of inspiration, theoretical and research-wise. I'm just going to round off by showing you a couple of examples from bigger workshops, what can be done if you are interested in play and serious play. So, over the years, we've found that what LEGO Serious Play offers is a multisensoric means of investigating complex issues to where there's no simple or straightforward answer. So LEGO Serious Play is really all about exploration, building up knowledge together, finding solutions together, finding new perspectives together. It should not be used if you already got the answer. So there needs to be some explorative potential, and it also, the good thing is that everybody can participate. You don't have to use certain words, you don't have to have certain experience, everybody can participate on an equal playing field.